Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure and honor to be with all of you this afternoon. I am Gabriel Bornos, Chair of our Health and Human Services Committee, and I am joined for the first time exclusively as a committee by Council members Lori Ann Sales and Don Lutke. So we are excited to have our conversation this afternoon, and I do want to take a point of privilege. So I have had the opportunity to work in county government for 12 years. And then for the last 4, obviously, as a member of the County Council. And I have had the privilege and honor of working with Ms. Amanda Harris in both capacities. And let me just say up front that her position is among the most challenging in all of county government. The requirements that are placed on this type of position and the moving targets that are constant, and the unfortunate reality that much of the job is bound by federal and state law, which is out of our control. And who could have predicted a global pandemic or some of the other extraordinary challenges we have had over the last number of years under Ms. Harris's leadership. And I just want to publicly thank you for your leadership and your direction. You set us on a course that is truly among one of the strongest foundations in the entire country. And I am confident that the infrastructure you have set forward will continue. And as long as I'm breathing and serving on this council, I will make sure that it does. So thank you very much, truly, Sarah, for your leadership. And with that, we are here to get an update on shelter services for individuals experiencing homelessness. And just a couple of other points of privilege. I want to acknowledge the great work of my colleague and friend, Councilmember Glass, as he served as the lead for this very important topic, which was started under then Councilmember Leventhal. And while we are not going to have a lead in this term, that does not by any means mean that this is not a priority. It absolutely is. And this committee and this entire council is deeply committed to ensuring that we enhance the great work that has been done and see what we can do moving forward to, again, build off of the great work that has already happened. And I do finally want to acknowledge once again, and I will always try to do this, our incredible partners in this effort. We have some of the best community-based organizations and nonprofits in the country right here in Montgomery County. Who are performing heroically despite some ongoing struggles and challenges that, again, are often beyond our direct control. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Clemens Johnson to walk us through the packet and tee this up, and then we will turn it back over to Ms. Harris and her great team to walk us through the presentation.
Hello, and thank you, Chair Albanos, and hello, council members, and thank you to our guests from the HHS for joining us. This work session is a substantive overview of homelessness in the county and services provided to residents at risk for or experiencing homelessness. So in your packet, it really highlights the work of the Montgomery County Continuum of Care, the partnerships that we have between HHS and our other community partners, including coordinated entry, our housing programs, and all of the data that's collected through that system. So the packet also details the community data, including the point in time count, and it highlights the work of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness that was established in 2014, including the recently revised strategic plan to end homelessness by the end of 2025. The ICH just worked on the strategic plan again and revised it. The original one started in January of 2020, and it was a 3-year plan, and so that 3-year plan ended in December. And so the ICH and its partners achieved a majority of the objectives that they articulated in the plan, and so they are geared up and focused on what the next 3 years look like. I do want to call attention in the packet, the memorandum from Councilmember Sales at Circle 15 with questions to the DHHS. A few highlights of those questions include the timing that it takes for individuals and families to be housed, what are some of the priority issues that DHHS has faced and how the council can be of assistance, and also an overview of the rental relief program. And with that, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you very much. My colleagues would like to make a few opening comments, so I will turn it over to Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure and an honor to serve with you. Thank you so much for the thoughtful opening remarks. It's good to be on this committee with a veteran. I'll be following in Chairman Albornoz's footsteps. Really grateful and honored that I've been named lead of the the disparities, addressing the disparities in public health. And as we know, housing, education, how we construct our communities is also social determinants of health. And so while we're just having this discussion with HHS today, we're going to be discussing this committee along with economic development, our educational committees, and so this will just be the start of broader discussion. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to respond to the varied questions I included in the packet as well, and just appreciate the hard work you all do, because I moved here to Montgomery County because of the incredible moderately priced dwelling unit program. And so, you know, we don't oftentimes get praise for the good things that we are doing. And so I do want to commend this county and this body for the incredible amount of work that you're doing across the county and throughout the pandemic. And I know that there are only good things ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lutke.
Thank you. And I am really excited about being able to serve on the HHS committee with my colleagues, and that I have been afforded the opportunity to work as lead on crisis response, which covers both HHS and public safety related issues. And I'm very excited about the new strategic plan moving forward, and for the thoughtfulness and care with which that was done in recognizing things that didn't go as planned in the prior plan and what you're doing to get there to keep moving forward. And for all the work that you've all done in being adaptive and flexible during the pandemic to make sure you were doing the very best you could to meet everyone's needs. So thank you for all of your work, and I'm excited to partner with you moving forward.
Thank you. So we'll turn it over to you, Ms. Harris.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Chair Albornoz, for your kind words. Likewise, I have really appreciated the ongoing support that you have provided to me personally and also to my team. I'm going to do my best to not cry. I also want to acknowledge and thank all those that are committed to ending homelessness in Montgomery County. Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's perfectly okay. I've cried so many times from this dais, Ms. Harris. It's not a problem. It's a badge of honor.
I thought I could get through at least halfway before I started crying. Okay, get myself together. Again, I want to thank and acknowledge all those that are committed to ending homelessness here in the county. It really does take all of us working together. As was said, we have some incredible nonprofit partners whose mission is to serve those experiencing homelessness. I also recognize the work of my colleagues across HHS and the other service areas. They have been great partners in this work and trying to bring the other services to people experiencing homelessness, like behavioral health and health care. I also want to recognize the leadership from other systems of care outside of HHS, including health care, our landlords and property managers who have given people a second chance, and of course the CEF team for giving it their all every single day. And the council members, the previous council members, and those in this new session, and the county executive for always prioritizing funding for housing and supports. Also want to recognize our concerned citizens, including the chair and the vice chair of their Interagency Commission on Homelessness, Jeff Goldman and Ebony Gray. They have also been amazing partners. Our state and federal partners, and then most importantly, I want to recognize those who have struggled and struggled with housing instability and homelessness. Their opinion means so much, and they need to have a seat at the table. And I'm so grateful to be joined today by Terrence Hill, who is a member of the Interagency Commission on Homelessness and also a member of the People's Committee, and also my friend and colleague. Okay, back with the glasses. Okay, so this afternoon we are going to spend some time talking about why we do this work. I think it's really important to make sure that everyone understands the core values of the homeless continuum. We'll also spend some time talking about what we actually do. We have new council members, so we want to make sure that you're aware of what CEF does and some of the things that we sometimes do and where it actually isn't our role. We'll talk about the demographics of who we serve and a better understanding of what homelessness looks like here in the county. I will say, unfortunately, this is happening a little early, so we'll not be going over the 2023 annual homeless point in time count. It just happened, and so we're still finalizing the results there. Then we'll talk about what's going well, and then where do we go from here. So like I said, you've received a lot of data in the packet, and Ms. Clemens did an amazing job on the packet, so kudos to her. And I'm going to be sharing some more data and statistics today. And while data is incredibly important, we need to remember that we're talking about people, not just numbers. And because we're talking about people, we need to understand the values that underpin our work. The policies and practices of the homeless continuum have been developed both because they are evidence-based and because they recognize the humanity of those we serve. Next slide, please. So one of the most important things and a major reason why we have been so successful is that we have adopted the Housing First philosophy. Housing First has now been around since the 90s, really came into favor in 2010-ish, has been recognized by HUD and the Veterans Administration as the way to approach homeless services. So what Housing First means is that we provide immediate access to housing without any preconditions. You can see from the chart that in our traditional system, there were many opportunities for people to fail. So there was a lot of folks that simply would not go into shelter. There still are people that will not go into shelter. I don't know if you've ever seen a shelter or spent any time there. It's not a fun place to be. Our new men's shelter is great, but it does serve 200 men. I personally would not want to sleep with 199 other people every night. That's a lot. And so there are folks that just never even get in through the front door. And then what was happening is once people got into shelter, because of their medical issues or their behavioral health challenges or any number of things, just they couldn't get along with other people. They may have been terminated. They may have just left on their own because they didn't feel safe. So there was people were falling through the cracks. And if those that were successful were then able to move on to transitional housing. So transitional housing was for those that were ready to graduate, and that provided temporary housing and support services, but often came with a bunch of rules, even more rules than were in the shelter. So sobriety was often required, work requirements, and the success rates in most of those transitional housing programs were not great, somewhere around 50 to 65% or so were able to succeed. And that's after already screening out the folks with complex challenges. And then if you are able to finally get into housing without those support services, people struggled with having enough money to pay the rent. They may have had a tenuous relationship with their landlord and have fallen again into homelessness. So Housing First just levels all those steps, and so we take folks directly from the streets or in shelter and place them into permanent housing, and then provide a whole bunch of support services to ensure that they're able to sustain their housing. So that's that is what we do. That Housing First permanent supportive housing is an evidence-based practice. As I said, it has demonstrated that a success rate of about 90%, and people also do better with their mental health challenges, their physical health improves, there's lots of benefits. So that's the evidence-based practice. And then so not everyone that we serve is able to needs long-term subsidy and supportive services, but we still operate from that same philosophy that everyone needs housing, and we're going to provide the level of support that they need to sustain. So I talked about the immediate access. The other important piece of Housing First is choice and self-determination, right? People have a right to make bad decisions. I know there's many of us, me included, that like to have a drink every now and then, sometimes more than every now and then when the stress level is high. But that doesn't mean I don't deserve a place to live, and I'm still paying my mortgage. I was maintaining a job. So people have a right to make those choices, and you shouldn't have to prove your worthiness to be housed. There also is this belief of recovery orientation. So we know that people can and do recover. Even those with the most significant challenges, with the right support, that may be medication, it may be family support, it may even just be housing, will get better and will find meaning and purpose in their life with the right support. So that's an important component of Housing First. The services are individualized and person-driven. The reason why we do Housing First is because generally that's what people want first. If we're working with someone experiencing homelessness and they say, you know what, I don't think I can handle independent housing right now, I really want to get into treatment, I need to do that first, then that's what we'll do. It's really up to the person. And then the final piece of Housing First is really important and often not done well, is social and community integration. So it is very lonely. As I mentioned before, people that were sleeping in shelter were used to sleeping around a ton of other people. Even folks sleeping outside were often sleeping in encampments and had people around them all the time. And then moving into your own place can be very lonely and isolating. And it's hard to make friends and to kind of regain a purpose and a place in society. So it is our job to help them find their place. Maybe that's volunteering, maybe that's getting a job, maybe that's going to finding their faith and finding a faith community to engage with. Sometimes it's just hanging out. I know one of our providers, pre-pandemic, of course, used to take a group of men that were in the Housing First Permanent Supportive Housing Program fishing, right? To just go and be with each other. So that's why we do Housing First. The other values that the continuum of care has adopted, and I want to be clear, these are not Amanda's values. I share these values, but these were values that were established by the full continuum during our first. When we were developing the strategic plan that started in January of 2020, it was a year-long process that involved probably close to 200 different stakeholders. So there is buy-in into these values. So I already talked about Housing First. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is critically important, since we know that people of color are disproportionately impacted by homelessness and housing instability and evictions. So that is core to what we do. Collaboration across the continuum. None of us can do this alone. It really does take all parts, and the people we serve are being served across the continuum. They might be served in street outreach and shelter, also in a housing program. They might also be served through the meal program. So we need to be talking to each other. Then data and results-based decisions. So anecdotes are great, and we should be aware of the stories of people, but when we're making major policy decisions, that should be based on data and the results that we're getting or seeing. And then finally, the idea of continuous change and improvement. I know, Councilmember Lukey, you did mention that and in our previous strategic plan, we had made some mistakes, or things didn't go exactly as planned, and we were able to pivot. And this work is ever evolving. We didn't expect a pandemic. We've had building explosions. We've had other disasters that have forced us to look at our work differently. So this commitment to continuous change and improvement is really important to us. Okay. So that's why we do it. Now, what do we do? I will say this, I'll probably say it several times. Housing ends homelessness. That's how we end homelessness. We need more housing. It really is that simple. There are lots of other components in our homeless continuum, and we should invest in those. But if we do not provide more housing, we will never end homelessness. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a brief overview of the budget. You received in advance of this session pretty detailed information about our budget. I have pulled out the millions of dollars that we have received in federal funding for eviction prevention, and this does include our federal grants and also the over $10 million that the community receives in HUD Continuum of Care grants that does not go to HHS but goes directly to our providers. And I think I want to highlight that the way we spend our money should reflect our values. And you can see here that the vast majority of what we're spending our money on is permanent solutions. Permanent solutions to housing. And I'm happy to, well, we can talk more about the budget if you have questions later.
Yeah, and just really quick, we are going to break the presentation up and take pauses so that we can ask questions. And I think Ms. Johnson, you had some ideas of when there might be good breaks.
Yes, so this would be one. We thought we would talk about this and see if you all had any questions.
Great.
Great,
So
sure, no
the
problem.
why, that's where we are now. But
Okay.
yes.
So I believe it was in the packet that, was it $90 million was spent to house 12,000 families?
Look, over $90 million has been provided in eviction prevention rental assistance to prevent evictions. So we've prevented 12,000 evictions. I got that right?
So that was just an eviction payment?
Correct.
Okay. Because I'm looking at this $81,000 number. I mean the 81 million number. And how many people is this budget for? The range of services that are outlined on this.
That is a difficult question to answer. I will say in our homeless continuum, I think I'll get to this a little bit later, but we generally serve somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 folks in the homeless continuum. For eviction prevention, that number is much larger. Alana, do you have a sense?
It was over 4,000 households supported last year. And then you add in shallow subsidy, that we have a budget for another 1,700 households that are supported in the rental assistance program. That's the up to $500 shallow subsidy. And then your number was just shelter. That wasn't PSH and rapid rehousing also.
That is correct, yes. Thank you for clarifying. So that 2,000 to 2,500, that is for our crisis response services. In our permanent housing programs, I have that somewhere. I believe it's around 27, somewhere between 25 and 2,800 households that we serve in permanent housing. Plus the RAP, which is probably okay, so it's more like, help me with the math.
We're about 10,000 households.
Thanks.
I think if I added up all of our numbers correctly, are supported in prevention or in homeless services or housing for households previously homeless. And so that's reflected in the 81 million.
Okay, thank you. How many of these 10,000 numbers or the numbers in general repeats? Like annually, are we serving the same population every year? Is it different? Or because, when you say that the way to address homelessness is to build more housing. It's also the wraparound services, because homeless people who have mental health challenges, who don't want to go into supportive or temporary housing, have those challenges, and they're not going to ever go into a house no matter how much house we build and how many units we build. And so I just, I know we're going to have other discussions, but just wanted to know about those numbers.
Sure. So let me just respond to that. People do come inside. We have seen that. Montgomery County was at the forefront of ending chronic homelessness. So chronic homelessness is exactly the kind of folks that you're talking about. Long-term homelessness for folks with long-term disabling conditions. And although we did not technically meet the definition of ending chronic homelessness, we have placed over 500 individuals that meet that criteria into permanent housing. And our success rate in our permanent supportive housing programs is 99%. So most are, in fact, staying housed. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily stay housed in the first unit that they got. Sometimes it takes a time or two before it sticks, but because we believe that housing is a basic human right, we do not give up on people. And then the other thing I will say is not everyone that's experiencing homelessness struggles with addiction or mental health. We have lots of people that are homeless because they don't make enough money and housing is too expensive. And so the intervention there is more of a time-limited housing subsidy, connection to employment. There are more than 30,000 households in Montgomery County that are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. So that people are at risk. And one illness, one pandemic, one small thing could put them over the edge. So I just want to be clear that we have different kinds of interventions based on the needs of the population.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lukey.
Yes, I was going to say, so, what I'm hearing is, again, there's no one size fits all, and for some individuals experiencing homelessness, there's a more linear path towards getting to where they need to be, and you have those options, and for others, it's more circuitous, but they come back and you continue working with them time and time again. And I know it's hard to say how many instances of homelessness you have prevented, or because sometimes someone does fall back into that category and come back again, and we can't measure the things that don't happen as well. But for the population for whom they need continual services or touch points, or they may go into shelter housing and then they may hit those barriers where they exit. For that population, how often or how long would you say the lifespan is of getting them, for those that do end up in the permanent supportive housing, the time that needs to be spent to get someone there?
That is very individualized.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a range, a pretty wide range.
Yes, a very, very wide range. I mean, our goal is to get people connected to housing in 45 days. Mm-hmm. But we have certainly worked with folks for 4 or 5 years before they are ready to come in. Not ready, that's a poor choice of words. Before they are interested in coming inside.
Right. Thank you.
I will also say, it's later in the packet, but we do track the rate of return to homelessness, and our rate of return actually this year has gone down. It's about 14% of households served through the homeless continuum are returning to homelessness after two years, and most are returning after 2 years, not sooner. The percent after 1 year is about 3%. Good. And I don't think we have good information about.
Yeah, with prevention it's very different, because with the discrepancy in income and housing prices here, we do unfortunately have a lot of households who rely on our assistance for prevention year after year. So they will let themselves get that eviction notice knowing, okay, I can come and I can get that help of the $2,000, $3,000, or whatever, and that's going to balance my budget for the year. And so we do generally only give eviction prevention grants once every 12 months if it's local funding. The state program that we administer, we are only allowed to tap into that once every 24 months for a household. But so we do see some families coming back year after year, but they're coming back in a place where we are able to provide that prevention intervention, and they are able to then maintain their housing. And as I'm saying, they've just factored this into their household annual budget. Like, I'm gonna get my couple $1,000s from the county, and this is what's gonna make it work for me to stay in my housing. So unfortunately, I can't track how many of the repeats are coming from that specific approach versus how many, we don't have a way to easily categorize how many are coming in because there has been a medical or a income shift in between that time. But we do see a lot of repeats. And then the other programs like OHEP, the Office of Home Energy, is designed to be a repeat program that is expected that you are coming year after year because it is a credit to help you pay your utilities and maintain your housing. And the rental assistance shallow subsidy also, once you're in it and you maintain eligibility, it just rolls over. So that is in a sense a permanent shallow subsidy once you're in the program. So we do have attrition because people do fortunately are able to increase their income, but we do actively pursue people re-enrolling in that program also year after year.
Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm familiar with a program in the city of Frederick or the town of Frederick. I don't know if it's a county or a city program, but when people take advantage of affordable housing, a portion of their rent is put into an account, an interest-bearing account, so that by the end of 5 years, they can take the money out and they can purchase their own home. What sort of contingency or accountability are we creating to ensure that people are taking ownership of stable, of ensuring stable housing?
So, yeah, I might have you help me answer this, Terrence. What I will say is HOC had a program similar to what you're describing. It was called the Family Stability, something like that. Yeah, I don't know if they're still operating that program. I think for people that want to participate, I think it's a wonderful idea. We don't have the capacity to do that at HHS, but we would certainly partner with HOC to make that happen. I think we would always promote home ownership whenever possible. As far as accountability, people have to pay their rent, and they have to be good neighbors, and that is all that we require, because that is all that is required of the general public. Experiencing homelessness or becoming homeless is not a character flaw, and people fall on hard times, and there are many folks that are going to continue to struggle because the system is set up that way, and the incomes are not high enough, and there is not enough affordable housing to go around. And even the affordable housing that is in place right now is often targeted to people at higher incomes, so 50 to 70% AMI. The folks that we're serving in the homeless continuum are 30% AMI at best, but most are extremely low income and will need ongoing support. And I don't know, I will just want to hand it over to Mr. Hill to see if he has anything to add to that.
Yeah, interjecting on that, I feel prey to the whole spectrum of being homeless. I was homeless 3 years, dealing with addiction, health issues, mental issues, criminal record, the whole 9 yards. And to the point when I first got into my apartment, I felt the loneliness and also wondering if you all were going to take it back from me. So, because a lot of false promises were built. Through that point, I gained employment, which I was able to pay my 30% contribution. But it became that the earnings that I was getting was just above AMI, in which I was told that I couldn't participate in the program because I was making too much. So I had to rethink this. Should I go part-time now so I can go below that? And that's what I did. And that caused me not to be able to save, not to be able to get a car. It stopped a lot of opportunities that I would have if the AMI was a little larger, and which that was under $45,000 at that time. So that was a hindrance, a barrier for me in that sense. Since then, I have a new job now, working with the community organization, from my understanding, Pathways to Housing, and which housing is first. And I understand the wraparound services and support a person needs, because I do that daily, boots on the ground. So I see the disparities. I go to the shelter often, so I feel the heartache, and plus I experienced it. And what I'm trying to say in this overall, to answer your question about the savings, I didn't have money to save at all, because I was now coming into learning my own budget, trusting myself because of my addiction, my behavior, and which is totally different now. It's a 180-degree change, and I'm able to maintain quite well. But initially, I needed the services, in which they were there. And through thought like the ICH and Amanda and her leadership had that in place when I arrived. So I appreciate all that. I don't know if I'm somewhat answering your question, but anything that you need to know about the transition from being critically ill, mentally, physically, and spiritually, getting to the point now where I'm giving back in the sense of working in the community with Pathways, and also I deal with addictions with Tree of Hope. So that's mostly multifaceted. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay. So I want to commend you on sharing that story with us, because the whole purpose of the government is to ensure that we support individuals through tough times and get them on the road to self-sufficiency. And so I too took advantage of a 30% AMI. I was still a student, a single parent. My mother was an outpatient addiction services counselor right on Twin Brook Parkway. And so she worked with a lot of clients who were struggling with substance abuse and mental health challenges. She ran the group program, so I'm very familiar with the stories and the trajectory, and I'm glad that you've been able to turn yourself around. We also have programs like Bank On that teach about, financial empowerment, financial awareness. I worked with VITA, the county's community action agency. So there are a lot of resources and programs that should be coupled with these homeless services to ensure that people who enter into these affordable housing programs don't leave the same way. And we don't continue to see repeats, because we are empowering and educating and preparing people for the challenging times while they're able to take advantage of those resources. And so, I know that you may be an exception to the rule, but I just want to make sure that while we're providing housing, these wraparound services are standard, and we're ensuring that we're educating people on how to maintain, how to grow their skill set so that they can maintain the higher incomes. Because I know that as you make more money, you lose access to the supportive programs. And so preparing people before they have to lose those programs, so you don't have to go to a part-time income. That's part of the continuum of care, is ensuring that you don't fall backwards, but we ensure that we uplift and help you move forward sustainably. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah. Well,
Yes, and those services are in fact in place, particularly around in our housing stabilization services where eviction prevention happens. We will say that over the last couple of years we've been very focused on just, I will say, cutting checks and getting money out the door. That was our charge, and that is what we have done, and we are very disappointed that we will be losing those federal resources, but encouraged to be able to get back to a place where we can provide stability services and not just checks. But the other thing I will say is what we're doing is working. I feel like a 14% return rate is pretty dang good. A 99% housing retention rate in our permanent supportive housing programs is great. Even some of our other programs that don't come with intensive support services, like the SHARP, that's a 12-month subsidy program, or a direct cash assistance program where we provide $5,000 for folks to resolve their own housing emergency. 88 out of 10 people that are served in those programs are successful and stay housed. And so, yes, of course, there is always more that we can do, but I am confident that what we're doing is in fact working, and I hope that this work does continue.
So if I could just jump in really quick. So we're 5 slides into a 38-slide presentation, and I think Councilmember Sales's points are excellent. I think some of them will be touched on in later points of the presentation, but I'll just, in this transition, I'll note, Mr. Hill, Councilmember Sales and I both had the opportunity to benefit from your culinary artistic skills, sir, at the Pathways event. He catered that particular event. That's the 3rd time I've had the opportunity to taste your delicious food, and I encourage everyone to participate. You are very talented, sir. So I appreciate you. Why don't we continue on with the presentation, and then why don't we take another pause, like 5, 6, 7 slides from now, and then ask more questions then.
Great. That sounds great. Thank you. So we've talked a lot about this already, but the way we organize our services and stuff is around our goal of making homelessness rare, brief, and one-time only. So our services are designed to do that. We've talked a lot about the services that are intended to prevent homelessness, our emergency financial assistance, that short-term prevention case management that I was talking about that we used to do, our utility assistance, energy assistance, our homeless diversion. So when folks might come in seeking emergency shelter, but we engage in a problem-solving conversation, and for families, 70% of those families were able to help them resolve their housing emergency without having to enter shelter. And then obviously you're all familiar with the COVID rent relief program. Then we have our services that the kind of the crisis response about very quickly connecting people back to housing. So we do housing location, like I talked about, those short-term, those time-limited housing programs. I won't repeat myself. And then finally, making sure that homelessness is one-time only. So that is ensuring that households get the right intervention at the right time for the right duration. So that is that services are tailored to meet the individual needs. And I think the other important piece of that is that connection to mainstream services. So the homeless system should not be the end-all be-all. We should not be the provider of healthcare services and behavioral health services and employment. That we really need to be connecting people to those agencies and programs that are best equipped to provide those services. So coordinated entry. So this is how we do it. Coordinated entry is a process in which we use a common assessment tool to determine what is the best housing intervention for people, and then we prioritize based on need. In our system, we have a centralized system, so anyone needing to access our services must come through housing stabilization. For families, our 3 offices in Germantown, Silver Spring, and Rockville, and for adult-only households, it's through the Crisis Center. It is a HUD requirement that we have coordinated entry, and the reason why HUD is requiring this is, one, because we don't have enough resources, right? Like, coordinated entry exists because we don't have housing for everyone, and only 1 out of every 4 people that is eligible for a housing voucher actually gets it. So we have to have this thing called coordinated entry. But in the previous system, it was complicated, messy. People didn't know where to go. It was really dependent on which door you came through, and also highly dependent on your relationship with your case manager. If you had a good case manager that you connected with, you're probably going to get into the best housing, right? But those that don't speak up or don't know where to go were often kind of left to linger on the streets or in shelter. So this is how it works. It's just a visualization of how that works. And I do want to just point out that most of what we're doing is permanent housing solutions, and that people they don't have to go into shelter first. They can go from street outreach directly into those housing programs. And every step of the way, we're using progressive engagement. So we want to try the intervention with the least amount of money and services first. And if we're not successful there, then we can move people to a higher level of care. I think we can move on. No, thank you. Great. Emergency shelter. I know lots of the questions that I received were around emergency shelter, and emergency shelter, again, is just one component of the homeless continuum. It is part of our crisis response system. Shelter does not end homelessness. It is meant to be a temporary placement for people until we can connect them with more permanent solutions. I am happy that we have increased the number of beds over the last several years through the pandemic. Historically, we had very few year-round beds. We had about less than 200 year-round beds available. So we expanded greatly during the winter months, and then when it got warm, because hot weather isn't dangerous. It is, in fact, dangerous for people. But those shelters would shut down and we'd shrink. So we're very happy that we do not have to do that any longer. What we have found, because we have grown so much, is our continuum and our shelter providers have experienced some growing pains. We did not anticipate all the cost and what all was needed to provide shelter at these large facilities and at this scale. We were in FY22 and FY23, we did increase the budgets for our shelter providers, allowing them to bring on more services, hire more staff. But we are still finding that it still is not enough. There's a lot of people, and we're getting bottlenecks because there's not enough staff or case managers to help people connect to housing, and so people are getting stuck and they're staying longer. And I know that there's been some requests that have probably come your way for security in our shelter system. I do support additional security for our shelters. We have seen a rise in, there has been more prevalence of drug use and some significant behavioral health challenges. There have been some violent incidents in the shelter. I say that with caution because I don't want to stigmatize people experiencing homelessness as dangerous or scary. People experiencing homelessness are far more likely to be the victim of a crime than the perpetrator. So I just say that with some caution. And I don't think that security alone is going to solve our problem, that we really do need to have those increased support services. We've even been toying around with the idea of co-locating one of the MCOT teams in our shelter, because that stuff is going to be needed. And we have added increased primary care services, so access to somatic care. We have a psychiatrist that is providing services in our shelter and on the streets. We also have peer support that is coming into the shelter, but more is certainly needed.
I just wanted to add one quick thing about security. Also, our support of it is security to support the residents staying in shelter. It is not as a barrier to prevent access for, as we were talking about, for some people it's really a struggle to come in. Anyone who wants to come in and join that path towards housing, we have to make space available for them. So security with some caveats.
So, and I'll just note really quick, I appreciate you bringing up security. Yes, we have absolutely heard from providers who understandably want to ensure the safety and security of their staff, but of the clients as well, which is obviously very important. I'll note, security is a broad topic, right? the quality of that security really varies pretty dramatically. And I am happy to report, and I want to thank all of you for working particularly on Progress Place, which I know had been an ongoing challenge. By many accounts, the provider that is there now that is providing security is going way above and beyond in the training of the officers that are there to help de-escalate situations and know how to handle them, have established relationships and trust and rapport with a number of the clients that come through, which is so important, who have to be treated with dignity and respect. So I think we just need more of that. And the firm that is providing that service, I know my understanding also is has expressed an interest in maybe expanding some of their services. And it's something we need to explore, maybe not right now,
Sure.
but revisit at some point in the near future.
Sure. So the security that's at Progress Place is actually county security.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But there is a provider, blanking on the name, that is providing security services. Has worked with MCC, our Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, for a long time, and is skilled at providing security. Yeah, you want to say something?
Just real quickly, on security, while you're addressing the situation, yeah, I agree that there are certain things that are happening in the shelters, and I'm pretty much aware. But I would like to reflect on the jail penitentiary type model that one would see with more security guards. To me, it starts from the behavior standpoint with peer support, and harm reduction can be more effective. It's modifying the behavior from that standpoint and holding a person accountable more so than more armed guards.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I was going to say
Oh,
it.
Ms. Hills.
Thank you.
Yes, so I had a quick question. This 968, that's the total number of beds we have countywide in all of our facilities.
Yes.
Okay. And out of the 437, these are all the hotels, overflow hotels?
Correct.
Okay. How often are we doing site visits to these hotels that we're contracting out? And do we have a line item, or what's the budget for paying for these hotels? Or is it done on a case-by-case basis, or is there a budget for this annually?
We had a budget for hotels. Prior to the pandemic, we were only using hotels for families as overflow. Since the pandemic, the policy has changed that we are not going to turn anyone away, regardless of whether they're an adult-only household or they're a family. So we have been, we've certainly increased the amount of hotels that we're using. And also, with COVID, we can't cram people into one place anymore. We are still adhering to social distancing, not the full 6 feet that was required at the beginning of the pandemic, but between 4 and 5 feet for bed space and no more bunk beds. So people are more spread out. As far as management of the hotels, so we contract for the hotels. We do provide security at our hotels. And then case management is assigned in a variety of different ways. Sometimes that is case management through SEF. We're providing those services. Sometimes it's with our outreach workers that are connecting with people in hotel. Sometimes it's their housing provider that's trying to connect them. But there are supportive services there.
Who's evaluating these hotels for cleanliness, for safety, for you mentioned that during COVID, there are distancing requirements, and we've gotten a lot of emails from residents who were recently placed into some of these hotels we're contracting with, talking about the deplorable conditions that some of these hotels are in. And so I just want to make sure, I know our caseworkers are overwhelmed with a lot of different cases, emergency cases, but how are we ensuring that we're placing these families, some with infant children or seniors? What sort of conditions are we placing these families in, and how are we holding these hotels accountable for the conditions?
Sure. So what I will say to that is that there's another area of HHS that inspects hotels and license the hotels. That's our licensure and regulatory services are responsible for monitoring hotels. No, they're not coming out every week. That's you get a license, and then if you're good until someone raises an issue. We have had L&R come out to our hotels and investigate. Being in a hotel is not ideal. It's not what we want for anyone. The alternative right now is the streets. And I don't think that that is ever a good solution. If there is interest in providing contracting with a higher quality hotel, one, we would have to have significantly more money. I don't know exactly how much. We can run the numbers and try and get you something. But we also have to have hotels that are willing to work with us, which is a challenge, certainly a challenge. And so it's a policy decision that would need to be explored about how much to invest in emergency shelter, as opposed or in addition to figuring out ways that we can more quickly move people from hotel into permanent housing, and really reducing the length of time that they're there.
So you're saying that once they get a permit to contract with the county, no one checks on the conditions of these hotels unless someone complains?
I don't work for L&R, right? So
Okay.
I can't speak with them. I imagine that there's probably, they have to renew their license. I don't know the frequency of that. I can certainly ask my colleagues in L&R, but I don't want to speak for them.
And that's under this division, or is that
No.
a totally separate division?
That is completely
What's
separate.
L&R?
Licensure and regulatory services.
Okay.
And that is under public health services within the Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay, can we get those numbers if they're available? Who's contracted to support overflow hotel space, and how often are they scheduled for site visits, the maintenance schedule, and how are they I guess tasked with figuring out how to address any repair issues or conditions of complaints about conditions. Thank you.
Sure. I don't know where we're at, Tara.
Councilmember Lutke. Got it.
think everybody's trying to move
Okay,
on.
yep,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Thank you. All right. So like I said, housing ends homelessness. So we definitely want to continue to invest. This chart just gives you our housing inventory count. So this happens at the same time as the point in time. And so it's looking at the number of beds that are available in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and other permanent housing. And you can see that number has been steadily increasing. And I also just want to point out that the 2023 numbers are preliminary. They are subject to change. I suspect that the permanent supportive housing and perhaps the rapid rehousing numbers will increase. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so who do we serve? Let's look at what are the demographics of people experiencing homelessness. So as I mentioned earlier, we have to look at not just the annual point in time count. That is really important. It's required by HUD, and that does give us a pretty good snapshot of what is happening and helps us identify trends. But that is not the number of people that experience homelessness in our county. That number is much greater. So you can see here on the chart, the long lines, that long line at the bottom, that's the number of adult-only households that experience homelessness in the year. So annually, in 2022, for example, we had over 1,600 people that entered our homeless continuum, but during the point in time, that number was only 408. I also want to point out here that there is a big drop in adult-only households being served between 2021 and 2022. I suspect and hope, I don't know this to be fact, but that is due to the advent of centralized intake and homeless diversion for adult-only households. Go on to the next slide. 10-year review, we're doing pretty good. We have been able to reduce homelessness by 41% in the last 10 years, with most of that reduction happening in the last 5 years. The greatest reduction was between 2018 and 2019. I believe it was about 28%, and that was when we were in the throes of our Inside Not Outside initiative to end chronic homelessness, where we had housed so many of the long-term stayers, which was always the hope that if you can, the old saying that 80 or 20% of the people eat up 80% of your time. So by being able to focus on those long stayers and get them into housing, it created better system flow in reducing those overall numbers. We have had good gains in health and family homelessness, and also overall reduction in adult-only households. I will say the last couple years, the number has not changed that much. I can't say for certain, but I suspect that 2023 is going to look pretty similar to 2022, which is not great. We would much rather see a decrease, but I feel pretty good about that, considering experts were predicting 40 to 45% increase in homelessness because of the pandemic. So us being able to maintain is pretty good. Just more by subpopulation, so we've almost cut unsheltered homelessness in half, had a significant decrease in unaccompanied youth that were literally homeless on the streets that we could see, and a major decrease in chronic homelessness. Next slide, please. This is just the distribution of the population type during the point in time. So you'll see that most of the folks experiencing homelessness are individuals, and that is mostly African American males make up the largest proportion of the homeless population. This is largely unchanged between 2018 and 2022. There was a decrease in unsheltered homelessness, but overall that's staying the same. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of the demographics. You can look at this. In the interest of time, I won't go over everything, but I do just want to point out the high percent of people that are identifying as Black or African American. So this is not based on point in time. This is actually based on the number served. So looking at everyone that has been served in the last 2 years, 48% identified of adult-only household identified as Black or African American, compared to making up only 18 to 19% of the general population. And again, mostly male. Next slide. Yes.
So I noticed 2 slides ago, you'd had a chart that showed the percentage, yep, there you go, of unaccompanied youth, and it decreased by a percentage point for, and parenting youth stayed the same. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you're using 18 as the cutoff point for defining youth, or is that not correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 18 to 24. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have, and I know we already went ahead a couple slides, do you have anything that shows what we might consider transitional aged youth, so it's like age 16 to like 25 as a snapshot, and how many of those are either members of the LGBTQ community and or have substance use disorder or mental behavioral health coexisting issues?
Yes, those are great questions. I do not have a good answer for you right now. That is what we're working on. So this information is just pulled from the annual point in time count. That is not the best way to identify young people experiencing homelessness. That count, it's largely an undercount.
Okay.
And for youth homelessness, it is defined differently even by HUD, so it does include unstably housed. So there's a different count that happens through the state of Maryland, the Maryland Youth Reach, that counts young people, and it's anyone under 24.
Okay.
And that happens in the spring, and we can certainly get the most recent report and share that with you.
Thank you.
I think you can go to that. So same thing for households with children. This is looking at who was served over the last 2 years. not surprising. That's mostly female-headed households with children. What is very disturbing to me is that disproportionality is even more severe for families. So 70% of families experiencing homelessness identify as Black or African American, and then another 13% identify as Hispanic. So predominantly people of color, women of color, are experiencing homelessness, and that holds true for evictions as well. Black women with children are also more likely to get evicted. Okay, do we want to pause?
Gone.
Okay, great. So if you could just go back 1 second. So I just want to talk about, well, we talk about ending homelessness, and there you go, right here. And we talk about ending homelessness, and you might say, well, what does that mean? You're never actually going to be able to end homelessness. And having zero homeless, like literally no one ever experiencing homelessness is not actually the goal.
Yeah.
The goal is to have a system that is able to quickly respond, and that the number of people entering the system is less than the number of people exiting the system. So if you think about the bathtub, we want to turn off the faucet to stop the inflow, and then we want to unplug the drain so that those currently in our system can exit to homelessness. Next slide. This is, for those of you who have been around, Chair Albornoz has seen our inflow-outflow charts many times, but this is looking at people that come in and come out each month. This is for adult-only households. You can see that we were doing really well in 2021. Unfortunately, the outflow has started to slow down in the last 6 months. Next slide, please. Also important when we're talking about turning off the faucet is to identify where people are coming from. And so you'll see that a lot of adult-only households are in fact coming from a house situation. So more than a quarter were housed immediately prior to entering homelessness. So that suggests that we can do more diversion and do more prevention. And then I also want to highlight that 11% are coming from a hospital or institution. So that's a substance use treatment program, a hospital, a residential rehab program, et cetera. And so we certainly, there's opportunity there to do a better job coordinating discharges. Yeah. So just looking at the monthly averages over the years, so in 2021, again, we did a great job. We actually had a negative net. That's what we want to see. That's what's it's gonna take to end homelessness. But you can see in 2022, it's starting to creep up again. And that, after looking at the data, it isn't that more people are entering our system, it's that we're not housing people fast enough. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide, please. So similar situation for families. Just we were actually doing really well prior to the pandemic, and throughout 2019 and 2020. We were housing people at a good rate and keeping, and that inflow really dropped. I will say that probably a driver of the reduction in inflow is because of all the tenant protections. Because people weren't getting evicted, because we had all this the federal funding to prevent evictions, we were able to keep people from entering homelessness. Next slide. So prior living situation for families is a little different. So more than half are coming from house situations. So again, we need to invest in prevention, particularly as the federal money is drying up. One thing that I would love for the county to explore is getting a better understanding of exactly where people were living prior to entering homelessness. So down to the neighborhood, not just asking the zip code or the city, because it's not all that helpful. Next slide. Just the averages here. So again, 2020 was a great year, but these numbers are not huge. And ending homelessness is absolutely possible very, very soon. We were very close in 2019 and 2020, and I think with the right interventions, we can get right back to that place. Yeah, so I did want to just bring this up. So this is our utilization rate. So the problem that we're having right now is not that we don't have enough housing resources. The issue is that we can't find units. So people that are connected to permanent supportive housing or connected with rapid rehousing, they have the voucher, they have the services, but we cannot find units. That's one, it's a tight housing market. Two, rents are increasing, so they don't meet fair market. For most of our programs, can't go above fair market. And landlords are being they're being very picky about the tenants that they want to rent to. We are finding some intentional and maybe unintentional discrimination, housing discrimination occurring. One of the biggest barriers that we're seeing is credit, and then requiring 3 to 4 times the income in rent, even if you have a subsidy, which is not always legal because we do have source of income. Next slide. So again, this is just another way to talk about that, looking at how long it's taking from assigned to accepted and assigned to house. So assigned to accepted is we make a referral, and then the person accepts and the program accepts, so that it's a match. That's a period of time. And then from accepted to house is once they're actually working with a housing provider. So on the adult-only side, it is taking entirely too long. It's around 80 days or so from assigned to house, and then even assigned to accepted is taking upwards of a month. On the family side, we're much better about connecting people quickly from assigned to accepted, but it is in fact taking longer to make those placements. Next slide, please. We've talked a lot about this, but these are our system performance measures. So this is how we make sure homelessness is rare, brief, and one time only. I will point out that there has been a decline in the number of people entering homelessness for the first time. And between 2019 and 2022, because of the influx in the federal resources for eviction prevention, we were actually able to decrease the number of people entering homelessness for the first time by 31%. So that's pretty significant. Point in time. We can go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the length of time homeless is increasing, not a good trend, but we are exiting more people to permanent housing, which is great. Next slide. I mentioned this before, the return rates of 14%, that's gone down, and then the housing retention I've already talked about. Good, keep going. Yeah, keep going, okay. So where do we go from here? We're going to end homelessness, right? So I talked about this with the inflow and the outflow, but we have been partnering with Community Solutions Built for Zero, which is a national movement to measurably and equitably end homelessness. There are over 100 communities that are participating with Built for Zero. Montgomery County has had a long-standing relationship with them. We were partners during their first initiative of 100,000 homes, which was about housing 100,000 people, and have been with them ever since. And so when they're talking about ending homelessness, they use a functional zero as the definition. And so that is ensuring that the number of people who are currently homeless is less than the number of people that you can house every month. You can go to the next slide. So as of December, when we had our community-wide meeting where we kicked this off, there were 610 people experiencing homelessness. Our functional zero for the full community is 89. So there's a ways to go. I believe that it is still possible. It will take a lot of hard work, but I do believe it's possible. And the way Built for Zero looks at it, in 6 months, you have to achieve 6-month milestones. So they break it up. So it's not going from 610 to 89 overnight. It is a process. Next slide, please. So these are the 6-month milestones, creating a fully operational youth coordinated entry system, reducing that average length of time from for families for identification to move-in to 45 days, decreasing the inflow of seniors each month by 50%. So currently 6 seniors, and seniors are defined as those over 62 in this case, from 6 to 3, reducing the length of time for vulnerable adults, and getting our veteran number back down to close to functional zero. Our functional zero number is 6. And then lastly, housing 350 people. 350 individuals, and we are already very close to that, and it's only been a few months. Next slide. So another piece of this is identifying the rocks and the levers. So what's getting in the way? Those are the big rocks, and then what can we do about it? That's the levers. Next slide. So I won't read all these, but you have them in the slide deck. These were rocks and levers that were identified by the community. So during that community-wide meeting where we kicked this off again about ending homelessness by the end of 2025, it was a work session, and so these were the rocks and levers that were identified. Just some of them. There's more. Go to the next slide. So next steps, I hope the county continues, is doing more of what works. So I've mentioned several times, Housing First permanent supportive housing definitely works, and I think it is the best way to serve people with long-term disabling conditions where other systems have failed them. They have not been able to access services in a traditional sort of way or get connected with behavioral health or other kinds of supports. Rapid rehousing without any preconditions is also proven to be really successful. In some other places, there are lots of other communities. They put a lot of eligibility criteria in place for rapid rehousing participants, like you have to have income, you have to have an ID. We have not been doing that, and like I said, 8 out of 10 people are successful. I strongly encourage the continuation of those innovative programs that we started during the pandemic, the short-term housing resolution and the exit bonus. That again is working 8 out of 10 times. I will say that the exit bonus, providing direct cash assistance, was not an easy sell. There was a lot of hesitancy from every direction, my staff, from providers, just all across the board. But I really see the benefit in that program in giving people agency to make their own decisions, and it has actually worked. People have used that $5,000 to purchase an RV, to fix their car so that they can do deliveries, to move, to buy a plane ticket, to fly to California, to be with family where they have supports. So, people aren't just, they're unique individuals, and sometimes we don't have a program that exactly meets their needs, and so it's really important that we maintain that flexibility and provide options for people. And I hope that we do more of this kind of direct cash assistance, guaranteed income pilots. There is the MoCo Boost, which is a guaranteed income pilot here, serving 300 participants that provides $800 for 2 years. And Steph was able to partner with other parts of HHS on that. 100 people from the homeless continuum were selected for the MoCo Boost, and we chose people from those groups that we thought were most likely to return to homelessness. So families and individuals that had received that time-limited intervention. The targeted and yet flexible eviction prevention has been great. It's definitely worked. We are going to have to think differently about who we prioritize for those services. I think the other thing that worked really well with the COVID rent relief program is that we didn't just pay off the back rent, but in the beginning, we were able to provide some prospective rent. So 3 months of prospective rent to help people kind of get back on their feet. And I think doing more of that would be really beneficial. We do have a pilot program, the medical rent relief, that we're just getting started. We don't actually have policies yet, so we're not accepting participants, but hope to soon. For people that are experiencing an acute medical issue. So maybe they just got diagnosed with cancer and they don't have good health insurance, or they don't have a lot of sick time, or some other like time-limited medical condition where we can provide rent relief for up to 9 months so that they can engage in treatment and don't have to choose between paying the rent or taking care of their health. The other thing that's working really well that I hope to continue is centralized intake and diversion. It's working great for families. It still maintains about 70% of families are able to be diverted, and it is working well and will be expanded for adult-only households. And then the last thing that we're doing well, but definitely need to do more of, is meaningful participation of people with lived experience, and not just hey, we've got this group that's an advisory, we have this policy, can you review it and check the box, but working hand in hand to develop programs and to develop policies, to review grant applications, and to have a seat at the table. In just a minute, I'm almost done with my part, and then I will. I'm happy to have Mr. Hill talk about that. So next slide, please. Okay, so that's what's working, but there are obstacles in our way, and some of these are not surprising, right? Like, we all know that there isn't enough housing. We need more housing, and we need more housing at the affordable level. And I think that's both in subsidies and also in actual structure. I think you need to do both. We've got to figure out these barriers to accessing housing and programs. The eligibility criteria and the documents that are required are definitely screening people out. And we're even seeing this with our nonprofit housers, those that are providing affordable housing. Not all, but some are pretty unwilling to serve people exiting homelessness, and that's a real issue. Affordable housing is the folks that are experiencing homelessness are the most in need of affordable housing, and there should not be restrictions or intentional barriers put up to gain access. And that is also true with our voucher program, and the Housing Opportunities Commission also has barriers that are getting in the way of serving people. They are you cannot get a voucher if you have a criminal background. You can appeal, but people don't know about that. They don't have time to do that. So again, those that are most in need are unable to access the housing and the supports that would help them be successful. The failures of other systems of care. So I talked about this briefly with the percent of people entering homelessness directly from a hospital or other institution. Shelter is not a discharge plan. And especially for folks that are coming out of an addiction treatment program, going into a shelter where there's drug use all around does not set them up for success. And so we've got to figure out a way to partner with those other systems of care so that we can move our work upstream and that we can collectively work to figure out a housing solution before they even touch the homeless continuum. The other big issue that we're seeing is just staffing capacity. That is true of nonprofits and of government. This work is really hard. And a lot of people don't want to do it when you could telework for a hospital and just do that from the comfort of your home. Our salaries are generally salaries, not specifically talking about government salaries, looking at my OMB analyst there. But for the salaries for our nonprofits, they're low, and it makes recruitment and retention very difficult. And then the final obstacle, which is huge, absolutely huge, is racism. BIPOC people become homeless because of our racist systems, and those same systems keep them homeless. We know that there have been decades and decades of housing discrimination, redlining, house appraisals in black neighborhoods are lower, zoning regulations that prevent the development of affordable units. In our child welfare system, there are significant disparities, not specifically in Montgomery County, but nationwide. 50% of black children will experience an investigation by child welfare. 50%. And 10% of children will be removed from their home that are black or African American. That I don't think that black or African American people do a bad job of raising their children. I don't think they're bad parents. So there's something else is going on about why they're being investigated at a much higher rate. People of color are incarcerated at higher rates. So black or African Americans are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people. And there's also just major disparities in our health system. So lack of insurance is a primary driver of poor health outcomes, and BIPOC households are far less likely to be insured. So all of these systems are working against people, and particularly black and African Americans. And we have to do something about it, and that is not something that the homeless system can solve. What we can do is we can ensure that people that enter our system are treated equitably, that we have good outcomes regardless of your race, ethnicity, or gender. We can try and break down those barriers to getting into housing, but we need the help of all to address the larger systemic and institutional racism that creates homelessness. I think that's it for me.
Great.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith, did you want to say something? And then I've got a couple questions from colleagues. Then I had a couple questions and points to make as well.
Yeah, just talking about the obstacles. The termination of Amanda from her position without any transparency. That's really felt because division being there and the leadership and all the hard work that has been done, not only by her but in conjunction with all of us, that sort of stings. And because why I'm bringing that up, that's like the false promises or the hopes that you get from a caseworker. So that's reflective, and that's why I'm bringing it up initially. Secondly, we're talking about affordable housing. There are some housing units or models to be considered, like the SRO or the affordable living units, which the rent's $500 in a large building, which can take on maybe 20 to 30 units and have wraparound services there at one location. That to me would help with a lot of the affordable housing disparities that we're facing right now. And then the AMI, as I said, when I had to make a choice whether to take the part-time job and have less, or take on a full-time job and a part-time job to get where I was at. Point in case, my dental bills. When I was at the shelter, I could have got dentist, but I didn't know about that. It wasn't brought to my attention. Then when I left, they said, well, you no longer can get that. You're working, so you can't get county services because you make money. Okay, all right, so I go to the dentist to get that. They said, well, we want $28,000 just to give you dentures. I'm like, huh? Okay, my insurance covers $2,200. And a lot of the things that I didn't remedy when I was in the shelter caused me to have problems now. My credit, like Amanda mentioned. There are a lot of people that I see on a daily basis that have a credit history of not maintaining a proper rent. But the rent was paid from the state, and because of that, they got evicted, and it's still on their credit report. So when they go to get another unit, the landlord won't bring them in because of that, their rental history. Then we're looking at the criminal records. So even though the diversion program exists, there are people with records that a landlord won't tolerate their record. So there are different reasons why people don't get the units, even though they have a voucher. Point in case, HOC, I applied for them, and I'm just at AMI, But they wouldn't take on my medical. I have a lot of medical conditions. I have AFib, diabetes, high blood pressure, a lot of that, and the cost. So if you look at what I'm making and what I pay out on medical, you see that there's a reason where my money is going. And if you would take that into account, I would be below AMI. But they said, no, this is the base, and this is what we're taking, and I'm sorry, you have to find assistance from somewhere else. And I do have that letter, and that was less than a month ago. So I just wanted to bring up these, and I don't want to take up too much time, but there's so much in this conversation, and the most important point is, the vision of our county executive, who's not given the clue of who's going to take Amanda's place, and what their vision is. So now we're up in the air again, and when we were full steam ahead, and looking at 2025, and I became excited. So now there's I don't know, it's a stigma, and I just don't want it to exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hill. I appreciate you and your testimony. Thank you. Ms. Harrison, then we're going to go to questions and a couple comments. Yep.
Just one thing really quick. Thank you, Terrence, for your kind words, but this is not about me. This isn't.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's
I'm sorry.
okay.
That had to come out.
I know, it's okay. But I do just really want to emphasize the importance of including people with lived experience, and the People's Committee is actively recruiting more members. We need to have a larger group. Right now it's predominantly people in our adult-only system, and we are looking. So if you're listening, folks with lived experience, please reach out to Housing for All at Montgomery County MD if you are interested in participating and having your voice heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to go back to the initiative. I think it was started under Councilmember George Leventhal to end homelessness for veterans. And he targeted veteran homelessness because of the high numbers. And when I see that the numbers for Black women and men are almost triple what it is for, the Latino, the white population, I'm just wondering what interventions are targeting that population now, or has anything been targeted directly to address?
So, let me see how to answer this. So we have to abide by fair housing laws, right? So we can't use race as a determining factor of who gets access to our programs. What we have done is trying to address it by proxy and address the barriers to accessing housing. So, for example, there was Councilmember Glass, or Council President Glass, and some other council members were able to put forth the Housing Justice Act, which limits a landlord's ability to deny people based on their criminal background. So that's a way of trying to address race, because we know that people of color are disproportionately involved in the justice system. So that is the way that we're trying to account for that. The other thing that we're doing is looking at our assessment tools, and the assessment tool that everyone in the country used for a very long time was found to have some bias, some racial bias, and particularly for women of color, for Black women. They were scoring lower, so they weren't getting access to housing at the rate that they should. And so we have started to develop additional tools and to evaluate those tools to make sure that there isn't bias. The future work of the Interagency Commission and the Reducing Racial Disparities Work Group is to take that analysis a step further. So we're really good at knowing who we're serving, but we want to look at our outcomes based on race and ethnicity, and that will help inform where we go from here and what policies or programs we need to change.
You mentioned a policy that Councilmember Glass introduced. did we see a shift in the numbers?
Well, it's a good start. The problem with fair housing laws, including source of income, Montgomery County has had source of income protections for a long time, is enforcement, and there has to be adequate resources provided to the Office of Human Rights so that they can, in fact, investigate, do some testing of properties that maybe they suspect are discriminating against. The way it works right now is an individual tenant will need to file a claim and then see that claim all the way through. And most people do not have the time or the resources to be able to do that. You get denied and you simply move on and try and find another place because you need housing.
So no shift in numbers, or do you have something to contribute?
We haven't really seen a shift, unfortunately, so much, but we are tracking now all the denials. So anyone who is matched to one of our housing programs and receives a denial from a property, we are tracking the denial. The properties are required now to provide a specific reason why they deny that, so that we can track those, so we can see, is it criminal, what type of criminal were they trying to deny off of, is it credit or income, anything else, and so that we will have that data to then look at and say, okay, this is where we need more interventions. But unfortunately, we really, if anything, to Amanda's point before, we are actually seeing more denials now as landlords. I mean, some of them were burned, some of them lost a lot of revenue over the last year, and they're just being really picky. And then with the rent so high, even our subsidy's not going to cover it, and the income requirements that they're asking for it. So we're tracking it and would love to share. Give us a couple of months to kind of see. I mean, we're getting denials frequently, unfortunately, but I think in a couple of months we'll have some preliminary data to start to share about where those denials are coming from.
And I know the numbers that you shared about the folks who are accessing homelessness services pales in comparison to the 30,000 people who are waiting for housing on HOC's waiting list. And so we have our work cut out for us, but targeted interventions, I thought we were going to see a bit more about some of the targeted interventions. And really disappointed that we have, all of these clinics all over Montgomery County. We have Mobile Med, we have the Primary Care Coalition, yet we have residents in homeless services who aren't privy to the resources in our community to access health care. And we don't have the mobile units visiting our homeless shelters. And so I don't know if that's part of the wraparound interventions or part of the focus for the next person who will, lead this, very challenging. I know that there's a lot of challenges, but I would hope that we, as we continue to explore ways to improve, especially through a racial equity lens, how we are truly providing wraparound services and support to this population. Thank you.
So I do want to say that we do in fact have primary care and somatic services in our shelters, and that has actually expanded. We also have psychiatric care, and we do have the dental van that goes around to the shelters. We can always use more, of course, and we also have I failed to mention this, and it is an important component of our work, our healthcare for the homeless team. That has nurses and social workers, and we do provide nursing care to people on the streets, in shelters, and also in permanent housing programs. That we have a hospital social worker that is assisting with discharge planning. So always we could do better and do more, but those services are in place, and I hope that they will continue and expand.
And you will hear more about healthcare for the homeless. Historically, gosh, it's actually at least, I think 5 years ago, it shifted from being under public health to being directly under SEF. But when it comes in front of the HHS committee, it still comes under as public health. So I believe it's on your calendar, maybe in March 2nd, thank you, that you'll be hearing more about the Healthcare for the Homeless activities also.
Okay. Councilmember Lutke.
Yep, just to follow up on that. So with respect to homeless individuals who are being discharged from the hospital, for example, it's my understanding that they can assist them to tell them how to get to the shelter or even to try to get them to the shelter, but they can't make them go in the shelter, right? So unless that patient chooses upon discharge from the hospital to enter the shelter themselves, they won't go through the door, right?
Yeah, that's right. That is right. It does help to have a healthcare for the homeless social worker there to assist. And I should also mention that we launched a new program, the Medical Respite Program, which is it's a temporary shelter placement that provides medical care to folks that are really, their medical needs are too great to be in congregate shelter, but they don't need hospitalization. They're ready to be discharged, but they don't have a home to be discharged to. So that has helped. And the Medical Respite Program, while medically focused, also works with folks with behavioral health challenges.
And do you know approximately how many people can be served by that program in its current iteration?
Yeah, there's 20 beds.
20. Okay, thank you.
And people are meant to be there 2 to 4 weeks.
Right.
That's the intent. It has been longer for some.
I was going to say, based on the numbers for individuals staying in acute care hospitals in the psychiatric beds and the length of those stays, that I'm assuming that the 2 to 4 week estimate is under where most people are utilizing those 20 beds.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. A couple points as we're wrapping up. So this is a regional issue, and I'm very familiar with what our colleagues in other jurisdictions regionally are offering in terms of continuing of care for these extremely vulnerable populations, and frankly, it pales in comparison to what we do here in Montgomery County. And there was a dramatic shift within the District of Columbia just prior to the pandemic regarding some of their policies that led to an increase here in Montgomery County, and some of our homeless constituents who were seeking care and services, and so they sought them and found them here in our county because that is what we do. That is in our DNA as an organization. And so, but we have to recognize that we must continue this regional approach, and the Council of Governments has done a good job. This has been a priority. Ms. Harris and I attended many of the virtual meetings over the last couple of years, but there is a practical reality that we are going to have to tackle this as a region, because it's not fair for the county alone and on its own to address these issues, because we will never be able to fully provide the level of support. And some of the numbers that you illustrated have improved dramatically, but we are sort of at the mercy of other factors that are beyond our control. And the last 2 points I'll make are, and Councilmember Lutke sort of alluded to this, but and of the 1% or so of those cases, fortunately, that it's the exception, it's not the rule, but and you have done an incredible job intervening in a couple of specific cases that our office has worked on with you, particularly in downtown Silver Spring, in which we've made every reasonable attempt to address the need of somebody who is obviously having severe mental health challenges, but a court system and a system at the state level that makes it difficult for that person to receive the care that they so desperately need. So there is going to have to continue to be an expanded conversation in connecting those dots if we're ever going to fully address this issue, because we can't do all of it on our own. And the points you made regarding those systemic issues are absolutely accurate, and I am committed, and I know my colleagues are as well, to in particular supporting our Office of Human Rights and making sure there's still 17 staff members down from where they were prior to the recession in 2009. And yet this and previous councils have added numerous strong bills, strong policies that, if they're not enforceable, are not great. So it's only half the battle, obviously. Well, Ms. Harris, thank you for this presentation. We look forward to this ongoing discussion and conversation. And Ms. Clemens-Johnson, was there anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
No, we're all set.
Great. So with that, this committee hearing is adjourned. Thank you.